Hello and welcome back to Forza Horizon 5. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at this brand new Dodge Charger Hellcat Widebody from the brand new Fast X car pack. Now, we're going to be doing a full build and walkthrough of this car, and we're going to dive right into the sights and sounds of it right now. And I don't know about y'all, but that has to be one of the best sounding superchargers I have ever heard in Forza Horizon 5. And I would honestly recommend, if you're any kind of person that likes the sound of a supercharger, you need one of these in your garage pretty much for that sole reason. Take another listen to it as we head back down the runway. I could honestly probably just do laps back and forth on the runway and just listen to that supercharger over and over again because it just sounds pretty much that good. Although another thing that you have to do whenever you get your hands on essentially any new Hellcat, you have to give it a burnout test. And this thing, I mean, it obliterates the tires in first, it does it again in second, and I attempted to continue the burnout in third, but the car just honestly didn't want to have it, and I completely understand why, because the tires in the back are massive, and even on the absolutely enormous stock horsepower, I think it's standard as the game gives it to you, it's over 800. Now, we are going to build it up to its full 1500 plus horsepower a little bit later on. However, that much power from the get-go is just so incredibly nuts. And honestly, it also makes it so that it's a very comfortable, very confident drift car, even just right out of the gate. So if you want a car that you can just pick up and actually practice drifting, maybe if you want to, I don't know, if you're new to drifting and you want to kind of develop your skills a little bit, but you don't necessarily want to go through the process of having to build an entire car, this thing is actually really, really good at working on the fundamentals. And even though it doesn't have a ton of steering angle or things like that, it doesn't have your traditional drift car parts, I think it does a good job of relaying the fundamentals of drifting to you as a player. Now, one thing though that I was curious about when I set off on this build is I had no idea how much horsepower it was going to make when it was fully maxed out. And I've got to say, I was incredibly surprised by this thing's overall capability. I mean, it literally, even though you cannot swap out the engine, you can still get this thing up to the power level that you would get from, I don't know, V12 swapping essentially any other car. So with that in mind, you don't necessarily need the engine swaps unless you just want the engine swap for the sound, which honestly, I don't know why you would want to do it for that reason either, because this thing already comes with your supercharged Hellcat engine. So it fits the personality of this car so incredibly well that it doesn't really even need anything else. That being said though, the little interior touches that you can see, like the race seats and other little details that you'll see on some of the other cars in this car pack, they really make these cars. And we haven't seen a Fast and Furious car pack in the Horizon series since I believe, what was it? Like Horizon 2? And I'm sure that seeing that Fast and Furious nameplate return to the Horizon series is going to make a lot of fans of, honestly, a lot of fans of both series very, very happy. Now, I do have to say though, I mean, obviously we've gotten a lot of incredible cars out of the Fast series recently in some of the films, but I'm kind of long out of the lore of the Fast series because in a lot of ways and I'm going to kind of go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but stick with me because it's relevant, I think. But legitimately, I lost so much interest in the series due to the fact that I was just like, oh, so I might as well just, I don't know, go watch an action movie. It just didn't feel like a franchise about cars to me anymore. And so I ended up kind of losing a little bit of interest in the series because of that. And because I was always someone that went to the series because of the cars rather than because, I don't know, of XYZ supervillain commits, massive heist of some sort, and so now we have to counter heist their heist, and it's just like, in a lot of ways, the cars kind of became background characters. It's like, yeah, the cars are sick, but the problem is, no matter how sick the cars were, they were still kind of just treated like background characters, at least in my personal, humble opinion. Now, I'm sure that there's going to be some people out there that may agree or may disagree or whatever the case honestly may be. But honestly, at the end of the day, I just truly want to see the cars get somewhat of a starring role again. I know that the cars are supposed to be essentially just supporting characters, but they don't need to be background characters because, you know, a lot of people got into cars through the early Fast films or rather Fast and Furious. I know that they want you to call the brand Fast now, and essentially that's just what they're calling the brand now, and I get it. It's easier to remember this, that, and the other, whatever. And honestly, how many times is Vin Diesel going to stand in front of a Charger and say family before it's like, okay, we get it, family, you know what I mean? Like, we genuinely get it. We get the family thing. Can we have the cars back in a more starring role, please? But enough of my going on and rambling and rambling and rambling and rambling and rambling. I ramble a lot in my commentaries. And, you know, it's one of those, if you can't do rambling, you probably won't like my commentaries. But it is what it is, and the rambling will continue. So with all of that being said, I do think that this thing has really good wheel fitment in the back, although I'm not the biggest fan of the wheel fitment in the front, because the wheel fitment in the front, even with pushing the offset out as far as they'll let you space it, it's still not quite far enough to have that flush fitment that I think a lot of people look for. Now, obviously, I'm sure they were, I don't know, maybe limited by the amount of offset that they could get without the front wheels turning and clipping into the body. However, I think it's not, I don't know. I mean, it's not really all that big of a deal. It's like, I'll take a little bit of clipping in exchange for that perfect fitment. However, front wheel fitment aside, this thing was still a really satisfying car to customize. I decided to go ahead and throw drag tires on it because I know that you can still drift somewhat okay-ish with drag tires on, and you can also use drag tires to get a really good launch, especially when you have all of this power. I mean, this thing, when it's fully upgraded, if you have anything on it other than drag tires, you're not gonna get any grip until probably like fifth, if that, depending on what transmission you use, obviously. Now, what I did was I just used a beefed up version of the stock 8-speed, because I mean, the 8-speed is very well balanced to this car anyway, and it also gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of the level of speed you can go for, because with the stock 8-speed, you have enough gearing to get well over 250. And getting north of 250, I mean, that's more than respectable enough for me. Especially when you can do it on stock gearing, because nothing in the tune has been touched. I literally just threw parts on this car and said, yeah, that looks good. It also sounds absolutely incredible when it's fully upgraded. So I would highly recommend going through and doing all the upgrades, even if you don't necessarily want to run this thing at its peak power output all the time. You should definitely experience it at the peak power output at least a couple of times. You might as well. It's like, if you don't, you will have definitely missed out on an experience. And it's an experience that I think if you bought the car pack, you might as well throw everything on the car. It's kind of like, I paid for the whole speedometer, I'm going to use the whole speedometer. And honestly, like, memes aside, it really just is a great car. I mean, there's obviously, I'm sure, going to be people that are going to say, ugh, another Charger, I don't even want it. And that's fine, that's fair. I mean, I get that there's a lot of different variations of this car, and there's a lot of different, like, it sounds to a lot of people, and I think myself included, you do kind of get a little bit tired of Hellcat this and Hellcat that, and what chassis is Dodge putting the Hellcat engine in this week. And while I know that these Hellcat engines can get a little bit tiring when they're overdone, because it kind of seems like at this point, we've seen Hellcat everything across the range from the factory. We've seen Hellcat swaps in like a, million different cars. But honestly, the Hellcat drivetrain still is impressive. It's still something that a ton of people want. And it's still something that gets a bunch of people to buy these cars. So I mean, for that reason, it's definitely a successful platform. However, with that being said and done, y'all, let me know in the comment section down below if this is a car that you plan on building if you get your hands on this pack. And if you do plan on getting your hands on this pack, what are you going to do with this car? Are you going to do a drag build? Are you going to do a drift build? Are you going to do maybe like a road race build? It entirely is up to you. And I hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll see y'all next time. Enjoy the rest of this video with some raw sound of this car.